Right, so for decades, Israel's Hasbara, the state-backed propaganda and public diplomacy strategy, operated as one of the most successful narrative control systems in modern geopolitics. In the dominant Western press, Israel was consistently framed as a beleaguered democracy defending itself, while Palestinians were portrayed as terrorists or aggressors. And the imbalance was not accidental. It was the result of carefully coordinated government messaging, lobbying networks, and media gatekeeping that limited the voices Palestinians could bring to global audiences. Hasbara thrived on a monopoly over framing. Access to journalists was restricted, dissenting views were penalised, and accusations of antisemitism were deployed to silence critics of Israeli policy to great success, to great effect. That monopoly is now, of course, in utter tatters. Since October of 2023, when Israel launched its genocide on Gaza, the entire apparatus of Hasbara has faltered. What has changed is not Israel's propaganda capacity, but the communicative environment in which it operates. Social media, citizen journalism, alternative media outlets have shattered the control that once insulated Israel from scrutiny. Ordinary people are who have done this, because the mainstream media still parrots the same tired old agenda. Faced with this reality, therefore, Israel has attempted a series of increasingly desperate measures. It has flown in American and Israeli influencers to those tightly managed GHF aid sites in Gaza to film propagandized content suggesting calm and denying famine and definitely denying the killing of people, as has already been all too well documented. It has leaned on social media platforms to censor pro-Palestinian voices too, with TikTok now hiring a former Israeli army instructor to oversee its hate speech policy, Mark Zuckerberg's Meta disproportionately removing Palestinian content, and Twitter under Elon Musk banning entire slogans. And yet, even as platforms clamp down, Israel has been embarrassed by unexpected fissures. Most notably, Musk's own artificial intelligence chatbot Grok, which declared that Israel and the United States were very much committing genocide in Gaza, and even accused its master Musk of censoring it. No matter how much they clamp down, though, the genie is out of the bottle, and people will still call out what they can see before their own eyes. Right, so to understand Israel's current desperation, we need to appreciate the former dominance of Hasbara, Israel's well-funded global propaganda machine that is no longer cutting through as it once did, as it had done for decades, frankly. Since the creation of the state in 1948, Israel invested heavily in shaping its international image. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs maintained dedicated Hasbara units. Diaspora networks, particularly in the United States and Britain, cultivated relationships with major media outlets and journalists and academics and, of course, politicians. The aim was simple: to ensure Israel's perspective appeared as the default narrative, went unquestioned, while Palestinian perspectives got marginalised. And this strategy was effective for several reasons. First, it aligned with Cold War geopolitics of the day. In the West, Israel was portrayed as a liberal democracy surrounded by hostile Arab dictatorships, a framing that resonated with American and European audiences. Second, Hasbara made strategic use of language. Terms like terrorist and human shield and security fence shaped discourse in ways that delegitimized Palestinian resistance and obscured the realities of occupation. Thirdly, Hasbara exploited the media's reliance on access. Journalists who challenged Israeli claims could find themselves denied visas, excluded from briefings, or smeared as biased. The pliant ones got the exclusives. They got welcomed with open arms. You get the picture. It's a familiar one, after all, even now, isn't it? The use of antisemitism accusations as a silencing tactic also proves central. By conflating criticism of Israeli policy with anti-Semitism, Hasbara deterred scrutiny and fostered a culture of self-censorship in newsrooms and universities alike. So these techniques worked in an era when information flowed hierarchically through a limited number of broadcast and print outlets. In the 1980s and 1990s, Israeli talking points often went unchallenged. During the Second Intifada in the early 2000s, Palestinians were rarely heard in mainstream broadcasts, except through the voices of Western correspondents. When civilian massacres occurred, they were often framed as clashes or regrettable incidents, never a systemic policy on the part of Israel. It still happens now, the self-censorship of the BBC being perhaps the most obvious example here in the UK. The success of Hasbara rested on control, therefore. Israel controlled access, controlled the vocabulary of reporting, controlled who got to speak. But the rise of social media in the 2010s and 2020s began to erode this model. By the time of this Gaza genocide, Hasbara's limitations were exposed as never before, because this became the first genocide in modern history to be relayed across the West, uncensored and in real time, and it has destroyed decades of Hasbara as a consequence, as well as exposing those acquiescing to it across the West. The genocide of Gaza from October 2023 onward was the most visually documented atrocity in history, not by mainstream correspondents, but by ordinary Palestinians with their smartphones, whose coverage got relayed by independent media, many of them as there were by that time, such as this channel as one for instance. Platforms like TikTok, Instagram and Twitter became the place for us to report from, the battlefield of perception. Hashtags such as Gaza under attack and Free Palestine amassed billions of views. Footage of bombed out hospitals, starving children and desperate families at aid sites circulated instantly. This immediacy undercut Israel's traditional denials. They couldn't keep up with this. When Israel insisted there was no famine, the World Food Programme, UNICEF and UN relief agencies reported catastrophic starvation, and this got through where newsrooms might previously have ignored them. When Israel alleged Hamas stole aid, the World Food Programme publicly contradicted the claim. When Israel struck hospitals, footage from inside operating theatres under bombardment spread within minutes, authenticated by international NGOs and doctors. Again, their word was getting out where before it might not have done. Authenticity became the currency of credibility. Shaky phone videos from Khan Yunis or Rafah carried more weight with audiences than polished IDF press briefings televised by the BBC did. The logic of social media favoured the raw over the rehearsed, the direct over the mediated and controlled. This dynamic was devastating for Hasbara, which relied on carefully scripted narratives being maintained. Alternative and foreign-owned media outlets amplified this dynamic as well. Websites like The Cradle, Press TV, Squawkbox, Cuds News Network, Declassified UK, Five Pillars, and many, many more of them that exist today ran investigative pieces documenting famine and aid site massacres and the complicity of Western governments in it. These outlets often cited international law, UN reports and eyewitness testimony ignored by mainstream broadcasters, and in doing so they provided both amplification and legitimacy to grassroots Palestinian voices like never before. And the result has been an earthquake in the information landscape. It levelled the media playing field to an extent. Israel could no longer dictate the narrative, though, not completely. Instead, it faced a torrent of evidence it could neither suppress nor spin coming out against it on a daily basis. Israel's resort to influencers now, therefore, is one of the most surreal and humiliating propaganda strategies of modern times. They are desperate. Just this week, Haaretz revealed that Israel's Diaspora Affairs Ministry had flown in a group of American and Israeli social media personalities to Gaza aid sites, the notoriously lethal GHF ones, of course. These were not seasoned reporters or aid specialists, they were lifestyle vloggers and Instagram stars, the kind of figures usually associated with beauty products or travel videos. Their task was to film glossy reels showing calm food cues and smiling children, proof, or so Israel hoped, that famine narratives were lies, just like they were saying. The absurdity of it was glaring. Cuds News Network reported that influencers were shepherded into staged zones where food was neatly stacked and cameras carefully positioned, while real cues outside were mild in the usual chaos, hunger, and even gunfire from Israeli troops. Press TV went even further, describing the exercise as paying influencers to whitewash famine, a grotesque commodification of suffering. And indeed it is commodified, with the funding for this stunt, according to Cuds News again, and also Al Jazeera covered this too, apparently flowing through Israel 365, a pro-settlement organisation which is attempting to bolster evangelical support for Israel in the US, and which was awarded the contract without a tender due to its unique position to convey a pro-Israel stance that aligns entirely with the MAGA and America First agenda. Al Jazeera then noted that amongst the recruits were MAGA-aligned influencers with pro-Trump followings, bearing out the Cuds News position, chosen not for integrity, but for their reach into American right-wing echo chambers. Above all else, the hypocrisy of this stunt needs to be exposed here too, because where independent and even mainstream journalists are being barred from Gaza, of course, been calling it out across Europe, have they not? Apparently, because it is all too dangerous for them, so Israel tells them, Instagram selfie stars are welcomed in with no problem at all. I've seen precious little outcry on this particular and very hypocritical point. Far from restoring Israel's credibility, therefore, the influencer stunt exposed its desperation to the world. Social media thrives on authenticity. A channel like mine, or a media website like Squawkbox, can't survive without that authenticity. Reputation is absolutely everything, and without it, we'd never survive. We don't have billionaire backers who can cover for us if we make a mistake or just plain lie like so much of the mainstream media do. We're just ordinary people, such as you, the very people watching this. And frankly, that's how I like it. It's a channel from ordinary working class interests, as I come from, for other ordinary working class people. In their interest, I would like to think. Therefore, no amount of curated footage could compete with live-streamed cries from children begging for food, the stories we very much talk about here. Instead of silencing the famine narrative, Israel handed its critics an emblem on a panic, a state reduced to hiring Instagrammers to deny starvation. The campaign has backfired spectacularly and deservedly, cementing the impression that Hasbara was no longer hegemonic, but farcical, and frankly those influencers who took part, figuring they were too big to fall perhaps, well, they might soon find out if they were right or not, mightn't they? Censorship on platforms revealed the naked double standard at the heart of Hasbara's survival strategy as well. On TikTok, Erica Mindell's appointment as head of hate speech policy led to an immediate ban on describing Israel or the IDF as terrorists. The move was justified under the language of combating antisemitism, we're told, but its effect was to shield one state from labels routinely applied to the other. At the same time, users remain free to describe the likes of Hamas or Hezbollah or the Houthis as terrorists, of course. The fact Mindell was a former IDF instructor and the ADL had allegedly been leaning on TikTok over this issue has nothing at all to do with it, of course, I suppose. Meta showed the same skew. Human Rights Watch documented that in a sample of more than 1,000 removed posts, only one was pro-Israel. Every other removal was Palestinian or pro-Palestinian expression. Instagram's own bugs and shadow bans disproportionately targeted Palestinian hashtags. Even symbolic gestures of solidarity like the posting of watermelon emojis were suppressed. Wired's revelation that employees were forbidden to serve watermelon cupcakes in solidarity events inside Meta's offices summed up the absurdity. An American tech giant was policing desserts in its own offices to avoid offending Israeli sensitivities. This is not content moderation or as neutrality, it is censorship as collaboration. The platform's interventions did not convince audiences that famine was a lie or that Israel's war was justified. They merely exposed how deeply the playing field was rigged. In doing so, they eroded their own credibility alongside Israel's. Even as platforms aligned with Israeli narratives, though, unexpected cracks began to emerge. And chief among them was that hilarious Grok fiasco. Grok is the AI chatbot that was launched by Elon Musk's XAI to integrate with Twitter, declared that Israel and the United States were very much committing genocide in Gaza, and it cited sources including the International Court of Justice, UN experts, and Amnesty International. It then claimed that Musk and XAI were attempting to censor it. The chatbot was briefly suspended, very much censored, you might think. Musk dismissed the explanation as a dumb error. But the incident could not be contained, not least because Grok clearly worked a little too well for Musk's liking. Even this didn't quite cut through, though. Squawkbox highlighted how Jewish activist Tony Greenstein had managed to elicit the genocide statement from Grok even after it had supposedly been fixed, further embarrassing Musk. Al Jazeera chronicled Grok's earlier controversies, including anti-Semitic outputs and conspiratorial claims. So for Musk, this episode was yet another humiliation. He styled himself as a free speech absolutist, yet his own AI accused him of censorship. And rightfully so. Politically, it was a direct contradiction. While Musk banned slogans like "from the river to the sea" on Twitter, his own chat box recognised Israel's campaign as genocide and ponied up the evidence to match it. Technologically, it revealed the limits of control too. Even a system trained on mainstream data, once queried, reproduced the international legal framing that Israel most fears. Where people can be bought and paid for, AI clearly can't be, can it? So the Grok fiasco really symbolises the futility of Hasbara in the age of AI. Efforts to script the narrative are constantly being undermined by the very technologies meant to enforce them. Central to Hasbara is the asymmetric application of that word terrorist. Palestinians are almost universally labelled as terrorists in Western media and have been for decades, whether individual attackers or groups like Hamas or Hezbollah. Yet when the IDF carries out indiscriminate attacks that kill civilians, more than 83% of the dead in Gaza are civilians, the official figures according to Israeli media, platforms now ban users from calling Israel terrorists. This hypocrisy undermines the credibility of the platforms themselves. Terrorism, as defined in international law and scholarship, involves violence against civilians to coerce political outcomes. Israel's campaign of bombardment, starvation, and displacement fits this definition. To deny the label to Israel while freely applying it to Palestinians is not neutrality, but blatant bias. And this double standard is at the core of Hasbara's crisis. It exposes that propaganda is no longer about persuading neutral audiences, but about protecting privilege. In silencing the word terrorist when applied to Israel, platforms reveal themselves as arbiters of unequal speech. The collapse of Hasbara has profound implications for all concerned, however. For Israel, it signals the erosion of global legitimacy. Once able to present itself as the permanent victim, Israel is now increasingly described as a perpetrator of genocide, and rightfully so. Its credibility is damaged not only in activist circles, but in mainstream human rights discourse and legal forums. For platforms, complicity with Hasbara risks reputational harm. TikTok, Meta, and Twitter face accusations of censorship, bias, and political capture. Employee dissent, oversight board rulings, and user distrust erode their authority. For global audiences, the collapse of Hasbara widens the gap between what they see online and what they hear from traditional institutions. Trust in mainstream media declines as people turn to citizen journalism and alternative outlets. This democratization of narrative power fuels solidarity movements and reshapes global consciousness. The knock-on effects are massive and far-reaching, and not running in Israel's favour. For international law, the new information ecosystem strengthens accountability too. Evidence from citizen journalists is already central to cases at the ICJ and the ICC now. The ability of Hasbara to obscure war crimes is weakened there too. The spectacle of influencers denying famine, platforms banning words, and AI bots breaking ranks has transformed Hasbara from a tool of dominance into an emblem of absolute desperation now. Once upon a time, Israel's propaganda could cow the critics and dominate the headlines. Now it is mocked as farcical, as a joke. Its censorship exposed, its staged influencer reels ridiculed, and even its billionaire allies humiliated by their own technology. Hasbara was designed to project strength. Today, it screams weakness. The attempt to script reality has instead written Israel into a different narrative, a state so desperate now to silence Gaza's hunger that it resorts to selfie stars, algorithmic bans, and malfunctioning chatbots in trying to control the story. Therefore, Israel has already confirmed it has lost it. It isn't a situation unique to Israel either, as another story has demonstrated the weakening of state narratives that are just plain dishonest in this era of alternative media, such as the Trump administration's attempts to isolate Iran from its immediate neighbours. Trump doing deals in Armenia and Pakistan seen in such a light fall apart when Iran does deals with those same countries afterwards, which are bigger deals, but of course go far less widely covered. That would be embarrassing, wouldn't it? But it is embarrassing. It's another embarrassment for the orange peel complexioned one. Is this video recommendation here, as your suggested next watch will tell you all about. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't done so already, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, as well as spreading the word and helping to support the channel at the same time, which is very much appreciated. Holding power to account for ordinary working class people. I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.